Hello. So, this is, of course, just my perspective. I never wish to tell other people what to think. The whole point of astrology is for us to be discovering and exploring our psychological states for ourselves and to grow. And I think it's really important to understand that this is a soft science. It is a exploring things. There's nuances. The realm of psychology, which this is, astronomical psychology, i.e., astrology, is meant to be very open and fluid. It's not like this is true, this is not. But that being said, I think it's so important. It is essential, in fact, um, to do what so many astrologers unfortunately don't do when they approach astrology, which is to look at the hard science that is underpinning, that is the foundation for the soft science of astronomical psychology, which is the hard science of astronomy. We need to understand scientifically these astronomical bodies in our solar system and the universe around us, if we're looking beyond the solar system, to be able to have a solid foundation for the astrological slash psychological interpretations that we're giving. If we don't understand the science, then we become very vulnerable to, especially as astrologers, when it's our job to understand this system, to understand what interpretations are supposed to be offering, right? If we don't understand the science, we become very vulnerable to excuse me, to giving interpretations that aren't as accurate. And that's the whole point. We're meant to be helping people with meaningful, insightful material to help them to understand themselves better, to help them understand others better. And so I've been studying astrology for about a decade now, actually over a decade. And I found, these are just my findings, right? Pluto, the asteroids, and Chiron. These are three groups of astronomical bodies, or at least in terms of the asteroids. These are three groups of astronomical bodies that, quite frankly, I don't think affect us psychologically. And we'll get into the reasons why. There's two different sets of reasons. One, astronomically, looking at the science of it, we have the ecliptic. We have the horizontal plane of the solar system, right? Here we have the sun in the center. We have all the different astronomical bodies that revolve around the sun. Pluto's orbit is irregular to this. Its orbit is more like this in relation to the rest of the astronomical bodies. So we're talking about Mercury, Venus, Earth, the moon around the Earth, of course, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. When these astronomical bodies formed about 4 billion years ago, as we know them today, they have a very regular clockwork orbit. Hence why it's so compelling, not to mention their size as well. It's so compelling that they would affect us because they're more in tune with us, whereas Pluto is a very irregular orbit, and I think even more compelling than the irregular orbit, it is very small. If we look at a list of the astronomical bodies in our solar system by size, it is so tremendously insignificant in that list that, again, it just seems logical that it would not affect us. Now, I want to say a quick note. It can be very valuable to consider, as we talked about at the beginning of this video, to consider possible interpretations. For example, my Pluto placement has actually been very interesting to me. It's been very helpful to explore certain themes in my life, but quite frankly, I have it in my fourth house, right? However, it's probably more so that was just giving me a direction, a guidance into my Scorpio fourth house cusp, which is largely the same interpretation of what one would say is Pluto in the fourth house. And I've explored Pluto in the fourth house in depth, and again, it's given me a lot of value, but does it actually affect us that way? Again, from my conclusions astronomically, scientifically, no, I don't think it does. It's very compelling that we had Uranus and Pluto conjunct in the last part of the 60s, but Uranus itself, being in the realm of space known as Virgo, easily could also account for those effects. So we have to look at these things, and we have to be skeptical. I find it's funny, and it's also a bit dismaying, because I find that a lot of astrologers approach astrology from a more mythological standpoint. Chiron, for example, right? Chiron is in, I believe it's Greek mythology, the wounded healer, right? And again, looking at my Chiron in my chart, it's been very interesting. Oh, Chiron conjunct Moon. That says a lot to me about my experiences in childhood, my empathy and compassion. But also it could be moon in the 12th house, right? Like, again, we have to look at these things, and we can't just look at them from a mythological standpoint, because that doesn't make scientific compelling evidence. We can't say this astronomical body is tied to this Greek myth, for example, also with Pluto and Hades, right? And so that's why it does what it does. That does not function logically. We have to understand the science. We have to. So again, I think that's the Chiron too. I can't remember exactly if Chiron has the exact same orbit as Pluto, or if it's an irregular orbit in relation to the rest of the solar system. But it too is very small. It's between Saturn and Uranus. It's a very small astronomical body. And the asteroids too, very small astronomical bodies. Could they be helpful? Could they be interesting? Yes. But what I'm saying here, the whole point of this video is, do they probably affect us psychologically? They probably don't. Even if they were to, they probably have a very small influence. Now, I do want to say, what Pluto represents, I do feel is present, but I see that in the astronomical body of Mars. And so Mars ruling Scorpio, that to me, it says everything about Scorpio energy, everything that Pluto is said to represent. I do see that archetype of transformation and rebirth, and right? But I see that in realm of Scorpio. I don't think that Pluto, again, I don't think Pluto affects us. I think something that's really interesting, if we were to look at the astronomical bodies in our solar system, is to study, this is something that would be lovely to understand and to know. I don't have data on this, and something I think we all as an astrological community could really learn from in the future, is to study the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, because these moons are huge, especially in relation to us here on Earth. They are very large. And to study how Io or Europa, in terms of Jupiter, if it's on the left side of Jupiter or the right side, or if it's conjunct Jupiter in relation to the Earth, we have so much untapped information that we could be gaining there that could actually be much more scientifically compelling for us here on Earth, because these moons are huge and they could perhaps change our relationship to our Jupiter energy, or Titan with Saturn. This is interesting. So again, this is just my perspective. I never am trying to tell people what to think. Obviously, I feel it's not even feeling, I think logically, and I feel intuitively as well, that very firm in the conclusion that these astronomical bodies probably don't affect us. Astrologers, some astrologers, they come along and they just want to make their mark. And so they say, this astronomical body, it does this myth in particular, and it's just silly, and it's something that we really need to look at for ourselves and as a community, to make sure that we're being very stringent, because otherwise the beautiful science that is being utilized by so many astrologers, and that does function within this system, that science will be overlooked and derided by those outside the community. And that could happen anyways, regardless. But it's more importantly than that reason of helping other people to understand it, which is a good reason, and to be open to it, because it actually has stringent astronomical criteria for these astrological interpretations, is for us to be more accurate. That's the best reason. We just want to be as accurate as possible, and I think again, it's funny, and it's also like, it's dismaying that so many people will look at Pluto transits. I mean, even some amazing astrologers that I really love, they'll look at Pluto and lose their minds of, oh my God, Pluto is square this, and it's watch out, it's going to be a crazy weekend, and it's like, that probably doesn't even affect us. It's like, if we look at the science of it, there's not a good, compelling argument for that. And meanwhile, we have the moons of Jupiter and Saturn just going on their merry way, and it's like, wait, no, that guys, that's interesting. People, come on. So anyways, this is my perspective. I hope it's useful for you. As always, this is just one person's perspective. I'm very happy to hear anybody's perspectives in the comments. As always, it's meant to be an open forum. That's how scientific enterprises work, is people have different perspectives. We peer review it, etc. Even if this isn't an official academic program, this is a community of knowledge and of ultimately insights and wisdom, and we need to help each other to be able to guide ourselves to focus on what's most important. And this is one last thing I want to say, is in terms of when people come along and they say this does this or that does that, like just randomly to get like to make their mark, like that's my astronomical body, that's my contribution, without any kind of scientific reason, and probably not adding anything really of value to the conversation. um, you know the bread and butter of tropical astrology: Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, the house placements for all of those astronomical bodies, and the rising, the midheaven, the IC, the seventh house cusp, the descendant, all of the other house cusps. This is amazing information. This is enough for a lifetime. So if you've been studying your chart for a while and you feel like, oh, I just want something new, study the astrological transits and study the different aspects that are happening. They are changing every single day. I mean, as per the moon, anyways. The rest of them, though, are still changing, if very slowly. And year by year, I mean, I've been studying the transits for 10 years, and it's fascinating. And being able to look ahead to certain things, like looking ahead to Jupiter and Saturn being conjunct this year in 2021. And it's just so cool. There's so much great information. And then, of course, looking up other people's natal charts. And, of course, continuing to learn about your own natal chart. There is a lifetime, a wealth of information available there. So I just really want to encourage people to stay grounded, stay focused, stay critically thinking, and continue to find good reasons scientifically and astronomically, if you're an astrologer, to understand what energies are worth checking out, or if you're not an astrologer, but especially if you're an astrologer. Infinite love to you, my friends. Namaste. Peace.